right, everyone. Well, thank you for sharing your time with us today. I want to help us reorient who we are as a community, what we're up to this month. So this month of February, we are focusing on some of the local missions around us. We had Pastor Jordy Denholm last week. He shared about Jefferson Avenue Mission, just about 1.4 miles southeast of here. We talked about Mike and Charles, who are kind of catching their friends who are African immigrants, and they're meeting at Messiah. And I'm reminded then, in our prayer we say, it is his mission, not ours, right? That is the mission that's going on here. It is God's mission, not our own. We're not building a brand. We're not trying to build up something that makes us look successful. In fact, if we do this right, it'll cost us a lot. It'll hit our pocketbooks, it'll hit our lives, it'll require quite a bit of us to be sent to these places. But I take a lot of solace in knowing that it is God's mission, not ours. I take a lot of solace in that because I wanted to confess to each of you, confess to all of you, there are two places where I do not bring my faith. There are two places where I leave behind my faith. The first one is airports. The second one is airplanes. So I avoid, like the plague, having to have such conversations in airports and airplanes. I can't even tell you, I know every pastor is already thinking of an illustration in their head about a person they talked to at the airport, right? But I use many a strategy to stay away from talking with people in airports and on airplanes. I want to see if you have some strategies as well. Do we have any strategies for avoiding people in the airport, in airplanes? What do we got? Okay, phone. I heard headphones. Headphones are a good one. Anything else? What was it? AirPods are the signal, right? Don't bother me. Anything else? Books. Books can stop you. Okay, so about that. I'm a pastor, so the books I read have like something to do with God about them, right? And so I have to like do the old elementary school cover the covers with paper bags, right? I go to great lengths to avoid these conversations. A couple other things you can do to avoid these conversations. If you're in Southwest Airlines, you know how everyone picks their seat when they get on the plane at first? Just give like really slight coughs. Just little coughs keep people away. And the other one, and this is really the reason I don't like to talk to people in airports, is I get motion sickness. And so, in front of you, there is like a barf bag. If you just take that and hold it, just hold it the entire boarding process, no one will get near you. Even my wife, she will find a different seat on Southwest. But no, there are two places where I don't take my faith. Until there was, this is a story now, right, about an airport. No, there was a person. I was at Newark International. It's a terrible airport. It's awful. It's in New Jersey. And someone just kind of made a beeline for me. And I could tell they had something on their mind. And I made the mistake. I didn't have headphones in. I didn't have a book. I made too much eye contact. I thought if I made even more, they would then go away. But no, they came to me and they said, I kid you not, are you a Christian? And I said, no. But she said, oh. And I said, no. I meant I don't want to talk about that right now, right? But she continued, actually, and I kind of just had to say, thank you so much, ma'am, but no thank you at the same time. When I think about sharing faith, we have a word like evangelism. I know in younger people it almost seems like a dirty word. That's because in evangelism it can seem like there's some kind of transaction going on, right? Someone comes to you in an airport and you're like, what are you selling and how do you want to change me, right? And I think as we look at our friends and then we're told that we are supposed to go to them carrying our faith, it's difficult because, to be honest, nobody wants to be changed. I'll look like the weird friend. And I was thinking about this. We often talk about people who don't know Jesus as lost. I'm not sure that's so helpful. I'm really not. They are not lost. They're actually living usually pretty good lives, to be honest. But no, it is God's mission, not ours. What you find is that there is a different way. There's a different way forward for each of us. And And we actually see it play out throughout the Gospels. Not just in the readings you heard, but a thread all the way through the Gospels shows us what God's mission is and how he is going to accomplish that. So actually, if you would grab a Bible or your phone or whatever you want, we're going to go to Matthew chapter 23, verse 37. Matthew chapter 23, verse 37. We're going to take our time because, well, here's the thing. Your kids are going to see you opening a Bible, and then, I don't know, maybe when they try to give up on their faith in college, they remember that you cared about the Bible, right? They're going to remember these things, I'm telling you guys. So we model to our children that this stuff actually matters. And so we're going to be in Matthew chapter 23, verse 37. Verse 37. All right, I'm seeing people arrive there. We got time, but here we go. So Matthew chapter 23, verse 37. We read this a little bit earlier. It was a little bit of a weird statement because these verses are in a series of what you would call woe statements. Not like whoa, like W-O-E. So like you are bad is what Jesus is doing. And he's going after the Pharisees, the scribes, and what we're going to call the religious insiders. We're gonna refer to these people Jesus is talking to as the religious insiders. And right off the bat, it tells us that there is Jesus lamenting over a city called Jerusalem. We're going to call that the center of religious activity. Right? So there's Jesus speaking to religious insiders and speaking of a town or a city where there is the center of all religious activity. And I want you to kind of look a little bit further. Right before verse 38, it says, Jesus starts in, after the exclamation point, how often would I have gathered, right? And then it ends with, you were not willing. So, how often, and ending with, you were not willing, can you actually read that with me? How often? We're going to start there, okay? So we read together, how often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. Oh, Jesus has this heart that is broken, speaking to the center of religious activity, speaking to the religious insiders. And I love this image. I'm not a farm boy, but I'm sure we have some people who have seen this. But hens can be mean. That's like a chicken, right? They can be mean. And what Jesus is describing is saying, how I wish I could have seen all of you and brought you underneath my wings and brought each of you to myself. But you didn't want it. Imagine that picture of Jesus saying, I want all of you for myself. I'm concerned about you, but you don't want it. What we learn is that Jesus has a deep concern for religious insiders. He has a deep concern for those who are religious and on the inside. And you actually start to see that thread that Jesus is concerned about religious insiders all throughout the Gospels. There's a story, actually, and we believe that Jesus does seek out and to save all people. But first and foremost, he says, I came for the religious insiders. There's a story in Matthew chapter 15 where actually there is a woman who comes to Jesus and she cries out, Son of David, have mercy on me. And she has a daughter who's possessed by a demon. And Jesus actually kind of ignores her. And the disciples have a conversation with one another, and Jesus has the gall to say, well, I have no business with her. I was sent only to the religious insiders. He says, the house of Israel. She says, help me, Lord, you can do this. And Jesus says something kind of harsh to this woman. He looks at her and says, is it right that the food that was meant for children should then be thrown to dogs? He calls the woman a dog, essentially, and what happens is the woman actually knows something about children a dinner table and dogs. And you know something about that too, right? If you put children at a dinner table and they're eating food, there's dogs lurking, right? You have your family dog, and he's waiting for the crumbs to fall, and he's going to clean it all up for you, right? Well, this woman says, I will take just the crumbs off the table. I don't even need to be first in line. Just give me the leftovers of what you're trying to give the religious insiders. And Jesus looks at her and says, what great faith. What great faith. It's a goofy story, but what I think is going on there is he just got done arguing with a bunch of religious insiders. A bunch of religious insiders who refused to believe in him. And so he's highlighting this woman who has such great faith to take even the crumbs. And then he kind of looks out of the side of his eyes at the religious insiders and says, what's your problem? Why don't you believe? So I had dinner at Jeff Claytor's home the other Friday. It was Jeff Claytor is the senior pastor at Christ Memorial. He hangs out here. I hope you get to meet him if you have not yet met him. But we're kind of sharing about our lives and catching up on things. And I shared with him, and I was lamenting that I'm beginning to see that there are faithful mentors and spiritual fathers over me who have at times had to endure my naivety. I have learned that as a young Christian, I have people who are over me, who love me dearly, who have to endure at times my stupidity and my naive thoughts, behaviors, and words. He said, yeah, I remember. But there was actually one of those naive and dumb words I said just about a week prior, which is why he said, yeah, I remember. We were meeting together, and I told Jeff, yeah, you're the loved and sent guy. So loved and sent are the two words that guide our life together as a community at Reliant and at Christ Memorial. We believe that we're loved by God and sent by him with his purpose. And what's funny is I said, yeah, Jeff, you're the loved and sent guy. Very flippantly, right? And he kind of was like, is that my essence? Is that all I am now? I'm like a bumper sticker, a tagline? But you know what's beautiful about what I feel Jeff has demonstrated to me as a pastor is that loved and sent are two words that are not a tagline. What I meant to say is that they are two words that are at the core of his being. This is how he lives his life. And here's the thing. This is how he desires your life. He desires for you that two words would guide everything you do, that you would know that you are loved by God in Jesus Christ and sent into the world with God's purposes. You know, I've been able to see Jeff work for about the last month because I'm new here. And I don't know, Jeff doesn't do a lot of like wandering around Lindbergh in South County to like reach new people. He doesn't do a lot of like, all right, Nathan, here we go. Let's go meet some people on the street. Let's fix them. Let's save them. Instead, he humbly comes into the office and he teaches us how to be loved and sent. Jesus has a great concern for the religious insiders. And I have to think that these two words, loved and sent, were also born out of a great concern for religious insiders. So it's Missions Month, and Jeff tells me, pick a text, do whatever you want with it. And the first place your mind goes is maybe to a parable. A parable where God says, yeah, I go out and I actually save the old sad saps that are on the outside, the sinners, the tax collectors, the bad people, right? But even as I was trying to look through when Jesus does mission, when Jesus actually speaks of the kingdom of God, I continually saw that Jesus was very concerned for the religious insider, but he also had a mission to the religious insider. And let's just use this word mission like this, that God is working to bring back to himself what is already his. Right? He has already made everything. It is all his. His work now is to bring everything back to himself. And he will use all kinds of wild means to do that. He'll even use us, right? But he tells a story, actually, in Luke chapter 15. And it's of a prodigal son, like a son who wastes a bunch of wealth. And we think of him as like the really bad guy who lives like hell and should pay the price for it, right? But what we find is that this story that maybe we thought was perfect for Missions Month actually wasn't about the one guy who ran away with his father's wealth to go waste it on gambling and fun times. No, actually, before he tells that parable, you hear this is the scene. It says, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to Jesus. And so the Pharisees and the scribes, the religious insiders, grumbled, saying, 'This man receives sinners and eats with them.'" And so Jesus tells the story about, yes, there's a father and two sons, and the younger son takes all the wealth, goes away, squanders it, wastes it on kind of licentious living, whatever that looks like. And then there's an older son, the one who stayed home and did everything right. He did exactly what he was supposed to do. He trained under his father so one day he could inherit the estate and take care of the kingdom, right? Well, the younger son who wasted the money comes back, the father embraces him, throws him a massive party, and then the older son starts to get angry. He says, "I did everything right. Where is my gift? Where is my party?" And actually the father says, "Everything I have is already yours." And what we're left with in the parable, and what the scribes, the Pharisees, the religious insiders heard, is they aren't sure if that older brother actually went into the party. Jesus has a mission to religious insiders. And let me tell you that is very, very good news. Jesus has a mission to bring back to himself the religious insider, and that is good news. Because look where I am standing. And look where you're sitting. Jesus has a mission to the religious insiders. And that's good news because look where I'm standing and look where you are sitting. We often, I believe, if we're honest, identify as the religious insider. And while we have all the same problems and temptations, maybe as we go out and live our lives, what I would like to say is that we actually have an even greater set of temptations that can actually come to us. And it's actually why we need a God who actually pursues us. Not that we have some kind of faithfulness in ourselves where we can just say, "Oh, Jesus, I love you so much," but rather, in the opposite way, Jesus can say, "I do the loving of you, and I will not let you go." And so he baptizes us, he claims us, and he says, "You're a religious insider, and you know what? I'm going to keep chasing after you because I know that in our honesty, we can admit that we make boneheaded mistakes and become arrogant and think that we've got it all figured out." See, for religious insiders, we have a great temptation that maybe other people don't experience. I think we can experience a self-righteousness. We can think that because I'm here, I'm right, and they are wrong. It's so easy for us to make moral judgments of those outside of here and then be happy with ourselves. But what I see happen all through the Gospels is that Jesus is not making moral judgments of where he should or should not go. He does not say there is bad and there is good, and here I come to the bad. He just comes. He comes. He sees us exactly as we are. He does not ask us to clean it up. Instead, he just simply comes. He comes in a manger as a baby. There is nothing that could have stopped his mission to the religious insiders. I think also, and this is probably the one that I'm most guilty of, is there is an apathy or an ignorance. I don't really care. Sometimes when my life is going well, I say that was my work, not God's. But what we see happen in the Gospels is that Jesus shows absolutely no apathy. He shows no ignorance. In fact, he knows every part of ourselves, even the deepest, darkest parts that we'd rather not share. And it says that Jesus cared so much that it actually took him to the point of death. He focused, lasered in. He cared so much. He had so many opportunities to just get out of it. Completely honest. He could have stepped away and said, you guys deal with it yourselves. Instead, Jesus said, I will demonstrate my mission and my great love for you on a cross. It'll kill me, but I love you. He demonstrates his love on the cross, and then he proves that love in an empty tomb. And you know that Jesus cares. He has a mission to the religious insiders. You also might think, and the temptation might be for us, is just to play church. To have our hierarchies, our games. We can look for affirmation. We can try to be loved and seek out that love. And instead what we learn is that God is in control of everything. He reigns with a crown over all things. And there's no time for actually these power games, because God himself in Jesus Christ says, I came not to be served, but to serve. He humbles himself in his mission to save us. So I want to help us out here, and this is a part of Missions Month. And I'm going to ask that you open up the Bibles, or maybe you see one of these in the pews. This is a bookmark. All right. If you find one in a Bible, it should be sticking out. And I want you to look at the loved side of this bookmark. Now, there is no talismanic magical properties about this bookmark, okay? But this is a way we at Reliant as God's people are trying to order our lives and how we are sent out from here. And so what you see is on this bookmark, which I don't even know if you use books anymore. So we're kind of self-conscious about this. Anybody have a book to put it in? I don't know. But on this bookmark, let's look at that loved side. Let's look at that loved side. And what this tells us is about God's mission to us. God's mission to you. That in Jesus Christ, he became present. And you see that manger on there, right? That's the first part of the story. God became present among us. That is very good news. And then you see the cross, right? And you see that there's pardon. There is a forgiveness. There is a, I know what you have done, and yet I'm here. I will die for you. There's a pardon to this mission of God. And then there's power. There's a crown. That God reigns over all things. And Jesus actually, with the crown, sits at the right hand of the Father, advocating for you. He actually says, no, that's the one that I love. He advocates for us to the Father. This is the loved mission of God. God loves us. We are loved in a manger, a cross, and a crown, in presence, pardon, and power. But then at the bottom it says God's story in your story. What you see in the manger, the cross, and crown is that you have a story of how God continues to work in your life. And it's kind of short. It's just what it is. And here's my thing. I have just time and time again been confronted and met by people who have been present in my life and loved me. I don't know a time when I wasn't a part of the church. And sometimes I think that story isn't too remarkable, but if you tell that to some people, they are mind blown that you have been so well loved by the church. And I know that in some sense, both through the people who have been present in my life and in some, I know this is weird, some cosmic way, I actually experience forgiveness. I actually know that God is working out in my life His Spirit so that I'm not guilty, but I'm set free and forgiven. And then I know that there's a power. I experience this power in very humble ways. Usually it's after I suffer or do something stupid at my own hands, right? And then you see God's mighty work in your life. This is God's loved mission. But now let's flip it over to the other side. It says that sent word at the top. And then there's some lines. So what we want to do is consider that if we are loved and there is this work of God in our lives, that God is sending us intentionally to at least one person. One person you can put on a line right here and remember that you are sent to them. It's a person that you like, someone you want to be around, someone who may not know Jesus, someone who may not take seriously all of this stuff that you care so deeply about. But you can know that you are sent to at least one person. I suggest putting initials on it in case it falls out of your book and then that person finds it, right? They're like, whoa, I'm going to HR, right? But no, like, keep this as a reminder that you are both loved and sent. See, because you are loved and sent. There is no sent mission without being loved. There is no sent mission without being loved. And what we learn is that if you try to do sent mission without the loved mission of God, you end up being the person who just tries to change people. You end up doing transaction. You try to fix people. And guess what? It doesn't work. So before I got here at Reliant, I was talking with a few churches who wanted a pastor. And I was contemplating where I was meant to serve as a pastor. And never fails, every meeting, there would be some kind of statement like this: we need to grow. Or in the best way, we want to make disciples, followers of Jesus. Great stuff. And because I'm a young guy who apparently is supposed to have answers, they would say, what will you do? And essentially they say, what will you do so we can decide if we're going to hire you? And every single interview I bombed because I ruined that question. I would say, first, I want to make sure that the gospel has reached each of us. That's how the sent mission begins. When the gospel has reached each of us. I mean, this is really the part of why I can say something like, Jeff is the loved and sent guy. Because he has taken so deeply in his being that actually even no matter what he does in his job, no matter what failures he carries, and no matter what failures we carry, we know that we are loved in a tangible way. There was a Christ Memorial men's meeting a couple years back, and I started to see that this loved and sent concern for God's people was actually working. There was this older gentleman, and he was saying, yeah, one time I was sharing my story about how God works in my life, and somebody said, that's not right. And he said, how can that not be right? That's what happened to me, right? When you share the work of God in your life, no one can say, that's not right. No, that's your experience with God, right? And I have to think that a lot of us young people here, and really all of us, have a pressure right now. People doubt your story. People doubt that God works in your life that way. They pressure you to live certain ways. They pressure you to not believe that Jesus is who he says he is. And do not let anyone ever tell you that it's not real. Don't let anyone ever tell you this is all just a scam, that this is a money laundering scheme. Don't let anyone tell you that it's not real what you believe. If you need some language to help with that, think of the Big Lebowski. You remember like this one phrase he says? He's like, that's just like your opinion, man. Just say that in your head. Because there is no doubt the way that God is working in your life in a manger, a cross, and a crown. So there's another beautiful part to this idea of sharing who you are in a manger, a cross, and a crown. And that is that, and there are even people in this room who have carried out really evangelism, and they've lived their lives in a way that people out in the world and in their lives have questions. They have questions about sin, about death, about hell, about condemnation. My guess is not a lot of your friends are all too worried about that, right? It's a different world. The answer to that is God's mission in your life. The answer to that is you sharing who you are. Do not deny God's work in your life. You know, sometimes pastors get excited in the book of Acts when like 3,000 people were baptized. And I always say, yeah, that's not going to happen here. And they get all worked up like I'm denying God's Spirit itself. No, but really what's happening there is they have all the questions, all the dots in a row, and then kind of one guy stepped up and was like, oh yeah, here's the answer. You got it now. You're welcome. And 3,000 people were like, yeah, he's right. You don't have that luxury in 2022, but you do have a story. You have a story of God's great work in your life. This is where I share that I'm glad it is God's mission and not mine. Because I've gone through a couple of these bookmarks. I put names on here, and they have been, I guess if you really looked at it from the outside, abject failures. There is no one who has said, oh, you're right, I get it now. No, I've actually had someone ask me to share about my life and why I think and believe the things I do, and they just literally said, that is nice. That's nice. And I anticipate that that's a lot of the response you will get when you share who you are and what you believe. My most recent endeavor with this bookmark was actually, this sounds bad, but I waited until late at night when everybody had a drink or two, and then I was like, all right, now I can say it. Right? And I invited a friend. I said, hey, my man, I need you to come out to worship. It is just so important to me. I really care about you. And he said, I would feel like a fraud if I showed up to worship. And I said, well, the greatest fraud is that you've been running from Jesus for 10 years. We're still friends, right? We both remember that moment, but he knows I love him because he knows I take seriously God's work in my life. No, what I want you to know is that Jesus has a relentless, continued mission to seek and save you. And so this is what we believe. We believe that you are loved and sent. And at the end of the day, after the long work day where you feel like you failed your spouse, failed your friends, failed other people, you lay in bed and you remember God's work. You remember that you are first and foremost loved before you were ever sent. But you are in fact loved and sent. Amen.